Now, this feast is the next feast. It's called Imbolc, which is Old Irish. It means in the belly. So it's like the newborn son is just starting to emerge from the womb of the Mother Earth, because she is his mother. The earth is the mother of the horned god, but she's also his bride. How's that for kind of sick? But you see this all the time, like, for example, in ancient Egypt, because Egypt is kind of the penultimate source of all of this junk. And you have the idea of Isis and Osiris, and Isis is Osiris's mother, but she's also his wife. And that goes back in turn to the ultimate source, which I'm sure some of your listeners know about, and that's the whole thing of Nimrod, who's of course mentioned in the book of Genesis, and his wife Semiramis, who's also his mother. And they are kind of like the original template for all these different horned gods, mother goddesses that come down to us through the millennia, all the way up to the present day, to these witch gods and goddesses, okay? So anyhow, on this night, Candlemas, they believe that the babe in the belly is like this fire in the belly of the mother, and they need to enhance that by lighting fires. So this is called a festival of fire. It's one of several in the witch calendar, and of course, fire is a symbol of light. It's also called Breed's Day. Breed, we would pronounce it Brigid. You probably know women that are known Brigid if they're maybe from Irish ancestry, but it's actually pronounced Breed. And she was an Irish goddess, and this day was sacred to her. But you see, after wee little St. Patrick came along and came to Ireland, and drove all the snakes out and made them all good Catholics, well, they had to change that, and so they turned it into Saint Bridget. And so now we have Saint Bridget, or Saint Breed. And so she's associated with this night. And they often will light fires on an altar, and they will invoke the mother goddess through prayer, through drawing down the moon and things like that. And they also prepare talismans, and the most famous one, which you can see this all the time, even to this day in Ireland or in places in America that sell Irish knickknacks. It's called St. Bridget's Cross. And it's an equal-armed cross made out of woven, I don't know what you'd call it, probably grain, actually, like wheat stalks or dried pieces of straw or something like that. And it's actually a pagan talisman, even though it's an equal-armed cross. So, this is the Feast of Fire. Now, if you're a Satanist, because Satanists kind of keep the same calendar as witches do, but remember, Wicca is like Satanism light. So Satanists keep the same feast, but they take the gloves off. They aren't so nice. And so on this night, what they do is they are required to have a female sexual sacrifice. And what that means is they have to find a girl, preferably a virgin, between 7 and 17 years old, and they rape her and deflower her on the altar of Satan. And they offer up that terror, that energy that this young girl releases in her torment, so that Satan can feed on it. And all of this stuff, now, whether it's a white witch up at the morally more nicer slightly, all the way down to the Satanists, they all are basically doing the same thing. They believe that their God, false God, needs fire and energy and life force to come back to life. They believe that without that, they aren't going to have a spring. They aren't going to have the summer coming up into the heights of the heavens in June. They and I'm not saying all of these modern people believe that, but the Satanists do. They actually think that the evil one is depending upon these sacrifices, because the blood is the life. They take that line out of Leviticus, and they believe that by killing or by sacrificing sexually innocent people, that they can send energy so that the devil can get more power. It's the ultimate religion of blood and terror. And the white witches don't do that. They're still kind of part of that same satanic river. They're just downstream a ways from the pure evil. But and that's what happened to me. And I would submit to you that Wicca is, spiritually speaking, a gateway drug. Just like light drugs, quote unquote, like pot, can be a gateway to things like, cocaine or heroin or whatever. And that's what happened to me. I started out as a witch smoking dope. And eventually, especially when I got into the whole vampire thing, I got into cocaine. I was doing 20 or 30 lines of cocaine a day. And when I got saved, the Almighty set me free from all that. And one day, I never had to go to a AA meeting or an NA meeting or go into rehab. It was just pure divine power. Hallelujah. And, of course, I had to go through deliverance. But, that's a secondary issue at that point. So anyway, I guess the other thing I'd like to say, we put out an article a few days ago called The Dark Light of Candlemass. And we wanted to warn people that these feast days, like Candlemass, like, March Equinox, like Beltane, which is May 1st coming up, these are all times of great darkness and great spiritual peril. And I know, Shannon, you counsel and work with people that are coming out of Satanism and witchcraft, are you not?
Yes, sir. In fact, we were just contacted yesterday by someone who says they're involved in Luciferianism, and they're being tormented by demons, and they're at the crossroads.
Literally, yeah. Well, and so that these people, even if they come to Messiah, they get saved. This time of year is a time where it's kind of like they sense a disturbance in the Force, if you'll pardon the Star Wars reference, and they can feel this dark power building up, and they need extra prayer, they need extra maybe counseling or discipleship at this time. And even Christians that are involved in spiritual warfare, maybe they've never even been in the occult, maybe they've never been a witch. That doesn't matter. They're going to feel this. It's like there's an uptick in dark spiritual energy because the evil one knows that his minions, and literally we're talking tens of thousands of people here, because people often ask me on radio shows, well, how many witches really are there? And I used to say, there might be 10 or 20,000 in America. Well, nowadays I would have to add at least another couple of zeros to that, because it's become insanely popular, especially when you realize that there's all these New Age Twinkies, and I call them that because they have cream filling between their ears, that are running around that are sort of pseudo-witches. They might not call themselves witches, but they're basically practicing witchcraft, most of them. And so anyway, there's hundreds of thousands of these people, and they're all focusing their energy on this night and on the 7 other nights throughout the year. And I'll just say this, I'll give a quick plug here. If people want to have an excellent resource on Satanism, we have a book, Lucifer Dethroned, and in one of the appendices of that book is the entire satanic calendar. So people can kind of look, if they're like intercessors or prayer warriors, or maybe they have a family member or a friend or even themselves who've been into this stuff, it's a very valuable resource. And, because it helps to know your enemy. We're told that we are not to be ignorant of the devil or his devices. So, it is, like you mentioned Luciferianism and this person you were talking to. And see, that is a slightly different thing from Satanism, because Luciferians believe in the light side of the evil one, not the dark side. And they believe, like, for example, Albert Pike, who was a very high-level 19th century Mason. In fact, he was probably the highest 19th century Mason, at least in America, and head of the Scottish Rite, Grand Sovereign Inspector General, Supreme Commander of the Scottish Rite in the Southern Jurisdiction. And he was a Luciferian. He openly talked about it in his book, Morals and Dogma. And the idea of this marvelous light bringer. And basically, whether they know it or not, Luciferians are rooted in the ancient religion of Zoroastrianism. And today they're called Farsis. And they're now a minority religion. Well, they're probably a real minority now in Iran. But originally Iran was Persia. And Persia was the home of the Zoroastrian religion. And they had two deities. They had Ahura Mazda, the god of light, and they had Ahriman, the god of darkness. And Ahura Mazda kind of morphed over the centuries into Lucifer. And so Luciferians believe there's a god of light and a god of darkness. They believe the god of darkness is Yahweh. And they believe their god will be victorious someday over the evil, Elohim of the Bible. So there you go. So that is the background of where this person is coming from. Most Luciferians don't do sacrifices. They do practice magic. And they do all these occult things like, palm reading and astrology and all of that. Now, this feast is the next feast. It's called Imbolc, which is Old Irish. It means in the belly. So it's like the newborn son is just starting to emerge from the womb of the Mother Earth, because she is his mother. The earth is the mother of the horned god, but she's also his bride. How's that for kind of sick? Well, but you see this all the time, like, for example, in ancient Egypt, because Egypt is kind of the penultimate source of all of this junk. And you have the idea of Isis and Osiris, and Isis is Osiris's mother, but she's also his wife. And that goes back in turn